wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
Okay, so boys and girls, some of you know that The Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite book series of all time. However, I was not happy with the film adaptation of this trilogy. In fact, I thought it was a terrible adaptation. I was much more fond of the adaptation that was made for the prequel, The Hobbit. I know these are unpopular views. A lot of people liked The Lord of the Rings but hated The Hobbit. But in my mind, a film adaptation should be just that, an adaptation. As we are moving through this Unit 3 within Ad Minimum, we're focusing on different modes of communication, and we're focusing how those different modes can be used to support the message that is being presented through that particular mode. So basically, in my opinion, if you're going to turn a story into a film, then you should be adapting that story so the story is told better through that mode of communication, through that medium. That film should be offering something that we couldn't get through the telling of the story in the novel, for example. The Lord of the Rings trilogy, when they adapted that to a film, in my opinion, all they did was try to recreate the book, and it wasn't as good. If you try to recreate a book and put it on screen, the pacing is all thrown off because you can't have a movie going on for 6 or 7 hours. So so a film needs to be offering something different. You have to change the story so that it is going. I mean, you need to be changing the story or adapting that story in somewhat so that it's going to be effective through that particular medium. The Hobbit, on the other hand, they took one book, they divided that up into multiple movies. So the pacing I thought was appropriate. I know they added in things that were not in the book, but I felt that those stories that they put into that movie were appropriate. As an adaptation, I felt like they lent themselves to the story they were telling in that film very well and gave us, as an audience, gave us a pleasurable experience. This is what you are going to be focusing on through Edmentum this week. So the real goal is for you to create your own multimedia presentation, and you are going to make your own comparison as I just gave you a nutshell comparison of my opinion about The Lord of the Rings through two different mediums. And you can think about, I have some examples on the screen right now. We're familiar with books that get turned into movies. Wonder, for example. Many of you have read Wonder. Many of you have seen the movie. Sometimes movies are turned into plays. The Little Mermaid is a classic Disney movie, and it's been performed as a play. In fact, it was even performed as a play here at Trailside. Some of you have even performed in this production. Sometimes novels are turned into graphic novels, as is with the Babysitter's Club books. Those are older books. They've recently come back in the form of graphic novels. You can even have video games that get turned into movies, as we had with Dwayne Johnson's Rampage a couple of years ago. That's based on a classic video game that dates back to when I was young. So as you go through the tutorial for this week, I want you to think about a story with which you might be familiar, and that has been told through two different modes of communication. So I've got a list here on the screen that could include plays, movies, TV shows, video games, comics or graphic novels, musicals, novels, short stories, fairy tales, and even folk tales or myths. So you need to think about a story with which you are familiar from two different modes of communication. For example, if you read Wonder and you saw the movie Wonder, you could use that one. If you, some of you like to read comics, if you've read Civil War in the comic version and then you watched the movie in the MCU, you could make that comparison. The tutorial will show you how to do this, and it'll walk you through all the steps of creating your own multimedia presentation. The pacing for this week, after you are finished watching this presentation, I would like for you to start the tutorial today. Tomorrow and Wednesday, you will continue with the tutorial, return to Google Classroom, respond to the discussion question in Google Classroom. For that question, that discussion, I would like for you to explain the comparison you are making. That means I don't just want you to say, I'm comparing Wonder, the book versus the movie. I want you to give me an explanation of what you are comparing. For example, what I just told you about the Lord of the Rings would be an explanation. I could write in that discussion that I'm comparing how I think the studio did a poor job with the adaptation of The Lord of the Rings into a film because they didn't do anything different that would utilize that medium. They just essentially tried to recreate the exact same story for the screen, and it didn't work because the pacing wasn't there. I don't need to go into great details about what I'm going to say for why that pacing was off. That I'll put into my multimedia presentation later on. But I can basically give a summary of what it is that I'm going to present. Thursday, you have a choice again. You can write a journal entry. This week, I will ask that you share that journal entry in Google Classroom. I know many of you are writing these in your physical journals, which I appreciate, but I'll just ask that you copy and paste that at least into the doc in Google Classroom. You can join the live discussion through our synchronous session, or you can do extra work in the tutorials if you're behind in Edmonton. If you haven't even completed the first week on trifles, or you were not able to complete the Google Classroom assignments that I gave last week on a jury of her peers, you could work on any of that for Thursday as well. If you are going to attend the synchronous session, I just ask that you have a completed draft of your presentation so that we can discuss it at the meeting, because the focus this week will not be a Socratic seminar since we haven't read a story to debate. It's going to instead be a session devoted to helping you with any final revisions that you might want to make to your multimedia presentation. So I'll ask each of you to kind of share some of the comparisons and that you're making at that meeting, and maybe what it is that what software you're using or what it is that you're doing with your presentation. Journal entry will be something similar, so you should still also have a goal of having your draft done by Thursday. Then that way your final revisions can be made on Thursday or Friday. You'll submit your presentation on Friday and take the mastery test on Friday. Again, if you have any questions or concerns for me, please remember that you can reach out to me by email. You can sign up for a session with your parent during my office hours. You can attend the synchronous session on Thursday, where I will offer some assistance for these presentations. I look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday. Take care.